Thank you for listening to Chakras and Cusswords. This podcast has been brought to you by Anchor. Anchor has sponsored, distributed, and helped me create a good podcast to you. So if you have been thinking about making your own podcast, I suggest you use Anchor. It's easy to use and it's free. So go ahead, create your podcast, and I can't wait to hear it. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Chakras and Cusswords, a podcast that dives into self-improvement, completing goals, and overcoming modern-day obstacles. I am your host, Katherine, and together we will address our fears, establish self-awareness, and complete self-growth through honesty and reflection. Remember to please like and share this podcast. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chakras and Cusswords Podcast. I'm so excited you guys are here. Today, I have an amazing friend and an amazing topic. Today, we're going to talk about reducing burnout and how so many of us get stuck in that area of burnout with not even really acknowledging it until we've already hit the area of burnout, full on sizzle. So I have my friend Jennifer. And Jennifer, welcome to Chakras and Cusswords. And please introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you. I am so excited to be here, Katherine, and this is so fun. Thank you for letting me bully you into allowing me on your podcast.
No, I was excited to have you on. I was like, yes. I mean, in all honesty, you don't find many burnout coaches and people who are centered in helping people reduce burnout, because that is such like a big thing. And I think so many coaches actually promote people to like keep going. So
yeah.
Can you kind of tell us what is burnout for most people? Like how and what happens when they kind of get in that area?
You bet. Yeah. Burnout, I think the burnout concept of a burnout coach, I think, is relatively new to people because the concept of burnout is relatively new to people. It wasn't something people were talking about when I first started coaching coaching and focusing on this particular topic. But I've been a burnout coach for 6 years, but have actually been studying and researching the topic for 12 because I burned out myself. And there weren't any resources available at the time. I couldn't find any effective recovery methods, so to speak. And I feel like it made the process a lot harder than it needed to be, as well as a lot more confusing and really feeling unsupported, because people would just kind of look at me cross-eyed when I talked about it. So I'm happy that it's being talked about. I'm not happy that so many people are burned out, but it's also not a shock because really our culture is based on our work culture, I should say, and well, even our personal culture is based on productivity. How can we do more? How can we do more in less time? How can we be happier people? How can we, be everything to everyone, essentially, make others happy at the same time? And so there's just a lot of things that have been normalized within our culture, speaking American, the US, the United States culture, that have been normalized that are actually very, very stressful and not normal behaviors for humans. So that's how I got into it.
And because other cultures, they don't necessarily have the quote unquote like 40-hour work week or typical I say like hamster wheel lifestyle that most Americans have. They actually have it a little bit different, which some people might not even realize that there's
True. It's true that most people don't. I mean, we're very unaware, I think, how other people live around the world. I think there are people that don't live in America that aren't as aware, I should say, of how Americans actually work. And maybe they come here to work or to visit and are astounded by what they find out. But we, definitely live to work in this country, whereas in a lot of other places, they just work to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That is so true. So when you started like studying burnout, and was that because you were a coach who was getting burnt out at the time?
No, I wasn't even a coach at the time. I was somebody that was a small business owner and was completely fried. I was completely burned out. And when I couldn't find resources, when I finally got to this point where I felt like I was recovering, I had clear signs of it, I thought to myself, this is really awful. And I know I'm not the only person that has gone through this or feels this way. And I'm a writer by my nature. I love the field of psychology and have a degree in it. And it just became kind of a passion project at first. And then as the more invested I became in it, the more interested and the more information that I collected, I really decided that it was time to start creating some resources, some recovery resources, and get into the coaching.
Okay. What do you think is the overall like problem with most Americans? Do you think it's the actual work? Like it's actually, I gotta get up, go to work, and then I gotta come home, then I gotta cook dinner, then I gotta do that. Like, do you think it's like the actual workflow that's burning out most Americans, or do you think it's just everything? Like, do you think we're putting too much on our plate? Like we're just doing too many of the things? Like, how do most people get to this area?
That's a great question. And I will actually just say people in general, not just Americans. But, I'm speaking from what I know about the American culture because that's what I've experienced. But I think it's a combination of everything you just listed, as well as a mindset that's been ingrained in us since we were kids, just that we should be a certain type of person who does a certain type of thing. Very achievement oriented when it comes to school. There's just a lot of pressures that even I'm going to go ahead and throw social media in there as well, that social media has exacerbated for a lot of us. We see people doing things in our FOMO, or, doing things or having things that we would like to have or places we would like to go to, and even getting promotions in their job. And that kicks in our FOMO, as well as some mindset issues that, we have. We're not able to separate, the fact that this is a different person that has, a different lifestyle and their brain operates a little bit differently. But there are definitely a lot of different, factors that contribute to burnout. But, just to give a really truly basic definition of burnout is that it is chronic. It's, you burn out from chronic stress, from, physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, and that comes after a long period of time. And it's just something that, depending on what it is you're focusing on, different things can affect your stress levels or cause you to burn out.
Yeah, definitely like different things trigger it, or if you're maybe just doing too much all around and feeling that area where it's like you're not able to like focus on just one thing. And I kind of feel like for most of us, like if we're coming home and we have kids or we have dogs and animals that we have to tend to, and then we're like also have this project and that project, and just kind of putting ourselves in an area where it's like, okay, I'm like so burnt out. What are some of this? Like, are there like symptoms and signs that people might start to realize like I'm burnt out, or do they just automatically like plop on the couch and they're like, I'm done. Like, I'm so done. Right?
Well, that was my experience. I'm over this. I'm
Yeah.
done. I can't do anymore.
Yeah.
I like to tell people my give a damn busted.
Mm.
It's really, but yeah, there are signs and symptoms, and I like to say it's not your fault. It really isn't your fault. So our body, just to give a little bit of science background about how stress works in our bodies and our minds. We don't always notice when we're stressed out. The stress response inside of our bodies is automatic, and our bodies are built to adapt to different levels of stress relatively quickly. And so we don't always notice when that stress is ratcheting up and it gets to a place where we can no longer handle it. And usually the first clue that people have that they're even stressed out, let alone burned out, is that their coping mechanisms start not working. So the things that you typically do to soothe, unconsciously do to soothe your stress response, they stop working. Sometimes you'll just, take a deep breath, or you'll maybe go take a drink of water, or some things that are maybe just a little bit more obvious. Maybe you know why you go and have a glass of wine after work, but maybe that stops working. There are things within our body that prevent us from actually hearing ourselves think and hearing our bodies scream at us, stop, slow down. This isn't what you should be doing. So it's not always your fault when you don't notice that your stress levels are getting to a point where they're unbearable. But that's why people like me are around, to starting to help you understand, as well as build an awareness of your stress levels and when your body is starting to cry out. But some symptoms, some signs would be unusual levels of irritability. You might start having feelings of resentment. These are some of the lesser known signs as well. People don't always associate anger and resentment with burnout.
Right.
But those are two things that are cornerstone feelings, cornerstone symptoms of burnout, because you start to relate things in your head that are frustrating you, that are exhausting you. And so that's how those feelings of anger and resentment, start to build and develop. Exhaustion is absolutely a cornerstone. But I always hesitate to point that one out, because exhaustion is a symptom of like literally everything.
Right. Yeah.
But your relationships deteriorate, particularly your professional relationships. You start to have thoughts that your coworkers suck, that they aren't able, the quality of their work is never good enough for you, or they don't show up when they need to, kind of a thing.
Right.
You will also see changes in your body. There's outward signs of stress. You're losing hair, you might develop acne, there might be a weight change, either loss or gain. You are craving carbohydrates like crazy. And that may be a new thing for some people.
Right.
Where maybe they had a sweet tooth, but now it's like
times
out of control.
10.
Yeah. It's like out of control.
Yeah.
So those are some of the signs to really look for when your body is screaming, okay, I've hit my peak stress and I can't do anymore, and I'm heading towards burnout. And I think a lot of people, it really does show up one day as, I can't get out of bed, or they sit down in a chair and they just literally shut down. Their body just says, finally says to them, I've had enough. We're done.
Yeah. This is just too much. Because I think in all honesty, like, I feel like I grew up in a household where like everybody in that household, meaning my parents and stuff, and probably still like now, were like, quote unquote, very hard workers. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was implemented in us. you work hard to have nice things. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that is how you get there, is by working hard. You know, my dad would literally have probably 16-hour days,
Mm-hmm.
5 days a week. Like, he was a business owner who came from Mexico. So he started with nothing, you know, absolutely nothing, and built a business, a very successful business, literally from the ground up. And it was like, if you want to have anything, you have to work your ass off, like
Yep.
nonstop. And then my mom worked just as hard as my dad, if not harder, because she was the one still with the children, you know, and taking care of the children. And then it was just like implemented in me from like, well, you're not working hard enough. Or, you know, if you want this, you have to work harder, 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 harder. You know, it's like,
Yep. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I feel like that's the culture with like a lot of like people, and obviously with a lot of like families. I mean, like, I think I made a post like, you know, telling my dad like, oh, you know, I'm feeling burnt out. And he's like, you don't know, you know, like, you don't know burnout. You know what I mean? Like, don't bring
Yeah.
that term here. There's, you know, no such thing. You know, you work till you die, basically. I mean, he's 76 and he's still working. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this guy. Is he ever going to retire? Probably not, you know, but it's like, so how can we in some ways change this cultural structure, so many people, especially like our generation and like my children's generation, just come to the notion that like we don't have to make ourselves completely burnt out?
Oh, this is a good question, and a complicated answer.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of things that need to happen and a lot of things that can happen. And one of the things that, and I grew up in a very, very similar environment to you. My parents were small business owners, my grandparents, I mean, just almost as far back as you can reach in my family. And I was raised with the same mindset. And one of the things that I think is happening is we're all basing our work ethic on an achievement, overachiever kind of mindset. And overachievers, by definition, just, you know, aren't ever satisfied with, you know, the amount of work. It's never that they're never satisfied with their work. It's just that they're never satisfied with with the amount of work that gets done. There's always more to do. And a lot of us, you know, aren't that kind of person. We don't have that capacity within our mind, or it's just not something we believe in. But the culture around us obviously does, and we're pressured into it. And I think we can start with redefining what it means to work hard, because I think every industry, every job has a different level of hard work, but also starting to question if that's really, you know, the way to get things done is to keep pushing ourselves until, you know, pushing ourselves to exhaustion. And, you know, we're, as human beings, we're really good at just allowing, you know, history to repeat itself, not learning from, you know, our ancestors who, you know, got to their deathbeds. I mean, nobody ever gets to their deathbed and says, God, I really wish I had worked more and worked harder. They usually have a lot of regrets about not traveling more or spending more time with their family, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it's time for all of us to kind of wake up and say, hey, maybe it is, you know, the right thing for me to work 16 hours a day. Maybe that is something I really enjoy, but I have to understand that the person next to me may not enjoy that, may not want that for their life. And starting to be more accepting of the fact that, you know, there are people that are going to want to work differently. And I think we're starting to see, some of this show up in our culture with some of the younger, like the Gen Z generation that is starting to do what they're calling quiet quitting. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think the sentiment is there, but I think the what do you call it? The actual, how they actually do it is kind of going about it the wrong way. Right. I do think it's important that we learn, how to create boundaries earlier in our lives with both, the amount of work we want, to do, and as well as, with relationships. Because what we're seeing with the quiet quitting movement is that people don't really understand or have no practice in setting boundaries. And that's also something that's a passion project of mine that I discovered about myself, is that I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to say no. And I feel like if we can start teaching, our kids, and as well as starting to coach a little bit in the workforce, that, hey, not everything has to be pushed to the brink of exhaustion. Look what happens when you actually take a break. Look what happens when you actually give your brain a rest. You actually end up being more productive, and the quality of work is drastically different. But instead, we're choosing to ignore, those obvious research studies that are telling us that. But I think you also have to want to do that. And I think there are still a fair number of people that don't want to do that. But, if we can educate ourselves a little bit better on mindset and work ethic, start getting out of this distorted view of what we think hard work is or should be. Right. I think we'll have some success there.
And I mean, I think in all honesty too, because I have two I guess, I don't know if my son's a Gen Z, he's 20, but I think my daughter she's 24. So I think they're about, Gen Z, where I feel like with their culture, like they're both like completely like driven and have their own goals and stuff like that. But I also feel like with them, I'm trying to show them like, you can work and you can, work hard and blah, blah, but you also have to like be mindful with your money too, and not put yourselves in these like huge areas of debt, like the Gen X generation and the, baby boomers who are just like working just to buy, and
I think that's a huge part of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, for a very long time, my husband worked 2 jobs for multiple years, probably like for 10 years. He worked 2 jobs. I worked 2 jobs. Like this was the first time that maybe in the last 2 years that I quit one of my jobs, like ever since I became a nurse, and I was like, I need to just work because, I need to have all this money. And it was like, for what? I just buy more crap.
Right.
Like, yeah. Like, what am I doing? Yeah. And I think I feel like the Gen X generation, like the hustle culture is just really, and then a little bit of our culture before with the baby boomers, like before us, really just set up this area of you have to work. And then I feel like with this generation, they're becoming a little bit more cognizant to why and how come should I work so much? My parents look completely stressed out.
Yeah. They see the results of it. Right?
Yeah. Like, what is this bringing me? You know what I mean? And I think they're more acknowledging that. And then also with the hustle culture, I feel too with media, it's just so like, it just creates, I feel like it honestly creates a lot of limiting self-beliefs for many people, because it's like, well, you must not be hustling hard enough, or the reason why you don't have a six pack is because, you know, you're just not in the gym hard enough, or the reason why you can't, you know, do your business is because you're not waking up at 4 a.m. and running on a Peloton bike and doing all these things. It's like, what the heck is going on over here? And I'll be honest, the first time I ever heard of somebody having like exhaustion and was Mariah Carey.
Oh, really?
On TRL. I don't know if you remember when Mariah Carey,
that's a throwback. Yeah.
Right. Had her exhaustion period and like, you know, quote unquote, her little mental breakdown on TRL. And she had all these extra stressors going on with her personal and professional life. And she was like touring and she was doing all these things. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, she was admitted to the hospital. And I was like, for exhaustion? And I just remember being, and I was
take
like,
a nap. Just take a
and
nap.
I was like, well, that makes sense because she's famous. So since she's famous, she must be, you know, working harder than all of us, you know, just, but no, it could happen to everybody. So
yeah. And I also want to point out that women are twice as likely as men to burn out. There just are a lot of pressures that are put on women that aren't put on men. And we saw a lot of that in the pandemic. There was a reason that we lost almost an entire generation of women in the workforce, because, you know, we expect women not only to work, but we also expect women to take care of the children and take care of the house and, you know, also do a lot of emotional labor that just is not put upon men. I'm not saying that men don't do it, but it's not as expected of them. And I'm one of the other, you know, passion projects that I've, you know, kind of got going on the side is bringing some more awareness to this, that we need to do better at, and I don't want to use the word accommodating women in the workforce, but, you know, changing the way we think about how women work, you know, and our expectations of them needs to change. I don't think it's an accommodation problem. I think it's an expectation problem. So it's, you know, that's just something that really, and at the time, Mariah wasn't a mother. So
no, she wasn't.
That doesn't mean that but there's a lot of sexism in the music industry. There's a lot of other, you know, there's probably pressure on how she looks, her diet, you know, having this persona that really isn't her. And something that's also not recognized as a cause of burnout is inauthenticity, not being yourself. That's exhausting, trying to be somebody else, as well as trying to be everything to everybody. But that's, you know, it's not a surprise looking back at how she was probably living and her just one day having enough. You know, I need to see if that interview is on YouTube, because I almost wonder.
It is, where she had like, she was on TRL with, I remember it so
yeah.
I mean, you know, the mind of a 15-year-old girl can hold a lot of valid information. And I was like, whoa, what's going on with Mariah? She's like really tripping out right now. And you can
losing her marbles.
Yeah. And you could just tell that she was having something going on. And you know, and everybody's like, oh, Mariah Carey must be on drugs, you know what I mean? Or it's, you know, it's because Eminem's accusing her of this relationship, you know, or whatever was going on, you know, and probably a form of, you know, just bullying on different areas of, you know, being famous and, you know, whatever. And I just remember then the following week, they said like she checked into like some kind of therapy treatment or rehabilitation for exhaustion. And I was like, exhaustion. And I just remember thinking, wow, you know, it's because she's famous and she's working just nonstop and, you know, and yeah. but it can
Yeah.
happen to everybody because I mean, I'll be honest, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I need a mental break, you know, from work. And especially as being a nurse, like, there was a few times where it was like, you start to evaluate like your profession and you're like, I love my profession, but I don't know if I can keep this up for another 10 years, or I need to reduce my hours, or I need to do something where I'm not feeling so like resentful that I have to work. Like,
Yeah.
haven't I won the lottery? Right?
Why can't I be the $1 billion ticket holder?
Right.
There's something special going on with the medical professions, like nurses, doctors, as well as other service type or helping or caring professions like teachers, counselors, animal welfare or rescues, as well as animal shelters, veterinarians. There's a term called compassion fatigue that a lot of those helping, caring, service type jobs, the people that have them are more prone to developing that, because you're being exposed to trauma. You're being exposed to somebody else's trauma, and our bodies and our brains can't help but respond to that in an empathetic way. And we also end up taking on some of that trauma. Some of that trauma gets transferred into us when we are in the, caring for somebody else. And depending on how, you're set up, your mindset, do you have some healthy coping mechanisms? Are you seeing a counselor? Are you, do you have a healthy lifestyle? Do you have some way to refill your bucket at the end of the day, or decompress, to get rid of, all that anxiety, all that trauma? And a lot of, I think nurses in particular and doctors in particular throughout the pandemic were really being backed into a corner with care, and having to show a lot of compassion at a time when they weren't getting much shown to them. Right. And it's just something that I do talk about a lot with people that are in those professions. And compassion fatigue definitely can lead to burnout, but you can also have compassion fatigue without the burnout. But I do see a lot of it, hand in hand, that if somebody is experiencing compassion fatigue, they're either well on their way to burning out or they're in burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, what are your main tips that you would give somebody who is working in that area of possibly maybe starting to get a little close to burnout? Like it's creeping up there.
I feel it coming on.
Right. I feel this burnout coming on. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to share some tips on that, because I think we talk about being burned out, but we don't, I don't think there are a lot of stress management effective stress management tips that are shared with people. I think a lot of people Google burnout, or they Google compassion fatigue, and they get the same old set of solutions of get some sleep, take a break, exercise, eat better, drink water, take, that kind of thing. And while those things are helpful, they're just Band-Aids, really, because they don't attack the root of the problem. And one of the most effective things that somebody needs to do, first of all, just to, recover from burnout, is they have to find the root of their burnout, what actually caused it. And one of the things that I really encourage people to do when they feel like they're on the way to burnout is to start to build an awareness of their stress levels, and where it's coming from. And one of the easiest things, and it's no cost, one of the easiest things that you can do is build kind of like a stress chart or a stress journal. And every day find some place on your calendar or on your phone where you can, kind of make some notes. But have a scale. You can do it from 1 to 5, 1 to 10. The numbers don't, they have to have meaning to you. It doesn't matter which ones you use. But every day, rate your stress levels from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. 1 being no stress, 5 or 10 being my stress levels are out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So let's use 1 to 5. And at the end of the day, sit down and think through your day. And even as you're going through your day, if you're finding that waiting until the end of the day is too long, just maybe stop, put an alarm on your phone to stop midday and check in with yourself. Am I feeling stress right now? How much stress am I feeling right now? What caused this stress? Because stress is something that's so easy to ignore and something that is not easy to always notice. Mm-hmm. And if you start making a note of, that number, like, let's say you're at a 4, you had a 4 kind of a day, make a note next to the 4. Hey, what contributed to this being a 4? What happened today? You don't have to go into great detail. Just, I was asked to work extra hours. I didn't have enough help at work. Whatever, just something quick and simple.
Right.
And ideally you do this for no less than 30 days. And when you, at the end of 30 days, go back and start looking for a pattern. Are there specific days of the month? Are there specific activities that you were doing? Were there certain people involved? Do you see, a repeat pattern of something? And that can help you not only build an awareness of your stress levels, like, oh my God, I'm a lot more stressed out, than I thought I was. This is a big deal. I really need to work on this. But it also tells you where it might be coming from. And you may not get the target right the first time. Sometimes things are symptoms, like you may have a frustrating coworker.
Oh, I was going to ask that. What do we do with those coworkers that drive us kooky? And I'm sure I'm a coworker that drives people kooky too. So I'm just going to say, no offense to anybody who might be a coworker listening to this, because I know I drive y'all nuts, right?
Hey, at least no.
Yeah.
But it's looking. Okay, let's take the annoying coworker example. Ask yourself some questions. Is it you or is it them? And if you think it's them, what is it specifically that they're doing? And is there a way for you to have a conversation with them? Or is there a way for you to navigate this differently? Because sometimes when we're having a reaction to something else somebody's doing that we aren't crazy about, we internalize a lot of things. We build up a lot more stress than that. It builds up a lot more stress or anxiety than that other person that's doing the annoying is actually aware of. And, start to look for ways that you can either work around this annoyance. And if that's not possible, hey, can we sit down and talk about this? This is causing some issues on my end. Here's what's happening. There's, you could also be doing something that's causing them to respond in an annoying way. And I'll give you a great example of that. I hope I can say this on your podcast, but
you cuss if you need to.
Oh, good. Well, it is called Chakras and Cusswords, right?
Exactly.
So I have an extreme case of resting bitch face.
I love
and it is extreme. I look like I'm pissed when I'm actually thinking. And when I had employees, this was a huge problem for them. And they, I wasn't fully aware of how I was looking at people because I was thinking about something else. I was thinking about a business problem. I was thinking about a client. I was thinking about something that was happening in my personal life. And unfortunately, it made my face scrunch up like, mad.
Yeah.
And so I would, I ended up having a conversation. One of the things that brought this to my attention was having a conversation with one of my employees. Like, I'm like, what is your, it wasn't exactly these words. It was far more professional. It's like, what is your deal?
Yeah.
And this brave employee said to me, well, you always look like you're pissed. You always look angry. And so I'm afraid to come and ask you things. Huh?
Oh.
What? And she described what she was seeing. And that was my first awareness tick. And I went, oh, okay. So once I changed some of my behavior, I saw a difference in somebody else's.
Right.
So that's why I'm telling that story, is sometimes we're doing things that we aren't totally aware of. Like that coworker that sends emails at 10 o'clock at night. There's one of a couple of things that can happen there, right?
Yeah. It's like, do you not realize we're off the clock?
Right. But there are a lot of people that feel a need and a responsibility to answer that email when the expectation is that you don't answer it at all. You don't answer it until the next day. Right. So it's, hey, you sent me that email. You keep sending me emails at 10 o'clock at night. That's when I'm getting ready for bed. Is this an issue? You might be surprised. That person sending the email is like, oh my God, I have kids, let's say this is a working from home situation. Right. Oh my God, I have kids, and between, 2 and 4, I can't get anything done. So the work that I was intending to do then, I do later in the day, or I do at night.
Right.
Please don't answer me until the next day. Yeah. But because of the way we're conditioned in the hustle culture and the busy culture, we feel like we have to answer, or we have, there's something wrong with us. We're concerned of the impression that, we might be giving the other person. Right. So communication is also a big deal when it comes to burnout recovery and avoiding stress as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you give any, so I know that you had employees and stuff. So I feel like, it always comes like the boss or the person in charge is making this environment exhausting or unbearable or whatever. Would you give any tips to any people who actually manage employees or coworkers on how they can help their employees reduce burnout?
Absolutely. I think it goes, hand in hand, that management has to help the employees and the employees have to help management. Right. That it's a reciprocal relationship when it comes to stress management. I think that we've kind of got this, like you said, there's starting to be this mentality that management is bad. They're always there to harm. And there are quite a few managers out there, unfortunately. But their example, who they learn to be a manager from, or the direction they're being given is poor. And so their management and leadership comes across as poor. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's really would behoove both the manager and the employee to have a conversation about expectations. Mm-hmm. And, here realistically, what should happen? What are the hours that I'm expected to work? What's the productivity that's expected to me? What levels are there? Mm-hmm. What kind of communication lines can we have opened up so that we can, avoid confusion, or distractions, or really assumptions. Assumptions and rumors are killers in work relationships. Because, you just assume that your boss is a bad person, or your boss wants you to work 75 hours a week when that really isn't what they want. So it's having both the boss and the employee having a conversation. And I can almost hear the eyes rolling in your audience, like, I have had this conversation. Or
I still hate them.
Yeah, my boss doesn't care, God, it's clear you haven't worked. And I'm like, oh, I get that. Like I said, there's some really bad bosses out there. Right. But here's the deal. If you're an employee that is working in a stressful environment, and you truly have done your part in trying to manage the stress, manage your relationship with your boss, manage the productivity, and you are still not getting the response from, management that you would like, you have a couple of options. You can, change the way you think about your job, which is one option. Hey, maybe my expectations for this kind of work aren't accurate. There are some jobs like nursing where you don't get to clock out right at 5 o'clock every day.
No.
know?
Yeah.
So
there's sometimes where it's like there's no way you can, and especially depending on the department, there's no way you're guaranteed to get off at that time. Right. You could, because you never, like, if you're, no, you're lucky. Like,
if that's something, if that's something that's important to you, that you clock in at 9 a.m., you clock out at 5 p.m., not 5:01, but 5 p.m., then that is something you need to address within yourself, that maybe you're either not working for the right company, you're not in the right profession, or maybe your expectations need to be remanaged. Right. That, wow, in this line of work, it's never going to be a clear, I get to leave after 8 hours. There are jobs that are like that, and maybe that is a line of work to pursue instead.
Right.
And I don't want this to come across as victim blaming, or I'm blaming the employees, because this goes for managers too. One of the things that I didn't know about myself, I hate managing employees.
Yes.
I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
And I do not enjoy it.
Yeah.
And, that stunning realization changed my career. Because if I was going to be a business owner, one of a couple of things needed to happen. I either needed to change my attitude, like figure out how to have a different mindset about managing employees, or figure out how my business could run without me being directly involved in the management.
Right.
And so the solution ended up being hiring somebody that is their jam. They do not mind the chaos and the problems that come with managing employees.
Right.
And having that buffer between myself, and it was an expensive buffer, y'all. It did not come without a cost, and a hit to my, I took less of a paycheck to have this person, because that's how important it was to me. And I know that that's not always, a decision some people can make in their lives, but having that stunning revelation really changed how I ran my business, how I thought about my business, how I interacted with my employees, and realizing that was just something that somebody else was always going to have to do, because that's just not something about me that and this is going to sound so selfish, I was interested in changing, because there were so many other things that were interesting to me about running a business and being a business owner that, for now I can deal with this in a different way.
Right.
Will that always be the case? Will that always be possible for me? No. I understand that. And I'm not kicking the can down the road, because I have that awareness about myself. And so things, professionally will always be set up a little bit differently for me. That does take away some, earning potential in some cases. But, I don't think all of us stop and realize the role that we're playing in a certain situation. And I hear people tell me they're stuck in jobs, they can't quit their jobs, they don't have any choice. You do have a choice. You really, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you and what you are willing to put up with. And if you've done hey, I've communicated with my boss, nothing's going to change here, then it may be time to quit. It may be time to go somewhere else where, maybe it's a culture that's a better fit for you. Maybe it's a
schedule,
management.
It's the schedule,
and what you can do now that you have this awareness of, hey, this is why I didn't like this job. These were the roadblocks for me. when you're interviewing for your next position, this is how not to take burnout with you. It's to have that awareness of your strengths and your weaknesses, your expectations as well, and managing them as well as managing a potential employer. These are questions you can ask. Hey, what are the hours? How often will I be working overtime? What is the team structure like? Who does, whatever it is that bothered you about your last job.
Yeah.
Focus on those things for your next job to weed out, potential employers or management situations that aren't going to be a fit. Right. Otherwise, you just put yourself right back. This is why I say job switches. When people are like, I have to quit my job in order to recover from burnout. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's sometimes that ultimately is the solution, but really the solution is figuring out what burned you out. And sometimes it's the job and sometimes it's not. It's, your mindset, it's your expectations that are driving that burnout bus.
Right. And it's fine to have realistic expectations. Like I know like some people be like, oh my gosh, I got to cook dinner every night, or I got to do this, or I got to make my bed. It's like, no, not really.
Yeah.
Like you could give one of those things up,
Yes.
Or, I have to go to the gym every day, or, I have to go on my walk every day, or, whatever expectation you have, or I have to go to work every day. No, not really. You could, maybe find a job where you work part-time. There's all kinds of expectations that we could slowly give up. We just have to.
Yeah. And it gets really lonely. This is something I also had to learn the hard way, is that living your life is a team effort. You should have a support network and some mentors. And I kind of call it my board of directors of people that when I'm having issues with something that I can go to, that I trust, and say, hey, I need some help managing my expectations around this particular situation. What do you think? Right. And it's really amazing the perspective that you get on your life through other people's eyes. Sometimes they're wrong too, but for the most part, if you have a competent support network of people that respect you, want the best for you, can also are comfortable telling you no. You'll be amazed at some of the answers you get and some of the things that you're blind to about your behavior or about somebody else's behavior. You could be dealing with something at work that you think is totally normal, and you explain that situation to somebody, in your support network, and they're like, that is not normal and not okay at all. Here's how to deal with that. Or, you're describing something that's going on, and, this person can go, whoa, let's take a step back and, think about other solutions to deal with this that you may not be able to see. And that's how our brains work. We get very tunnel vision, and that's totally normal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And everybody, how can they find you or reach out to you? Because you give some amazing tips, like on your socials, and you're kind of a little bit everywhere. So I love. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You can find me, like you said, almost everywhere. I have a website. It's jenniferbassman.com. My last name spelled Bassman. You can find me on my website. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok. Both are Jennifer Bassman as well. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Clubhouse with you. But I do have a course coming out in, I believe, about 4 weeks that is specifically about burnout recovery. And it's going to be called the Burnout Recovery Method. So,
awesome.
Clever, right? It's clear. Right. It's clear what it is. But I am putting in an online course, my coaching experience, and also my burnout research. These are the things I make the path to burnout recovery clearer for you and easier for you. Recovery is not easy, but I will make it easier for you by giving you clearer paths to recovery.
That's amazing.
Thank
you so much. And I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes, and everybody. Yay! And everybody, I want to thank you for listening to Chakras and Cusswords. Please like, subscribe, and share with a friend, especially a friend you see they're a little irritable. They might be burned out. So make sure to share this podcast with them.
And thank you to your audience. I really have enjoyed talking with you, Katherine. You always crack me up. And if your audience is anything like you, and I imagine that they are, because great minds always think alike and gather. Y'all are awesome. Absolutely amazing. And I would love to meet all of you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have an amazing day. Bye.